Good afternoon. We are back from recess. It is 1:40 PM and picking back up with our budget work session and handing it straight to Robin.
Thank you, Commissioner. As I stated earlier, I had a meeting this afternoon with our assessor, Stephen Drew, to discuss a potential MOU regarding the REIT Technology Fund. And just to recap, that MOU would have been an agreement between the Board of County Commissioners, the assessor, and the treasurer. Because while the fund is appropriated by the board, we have a new legal opinion that says that the treasurer has a say in how the money is spent. The assessor let me know about legislation that is in play. There was a bill introduced last year to increase the amount of money that's deposited into the fund, and direction on how that additional money might be spent. There were disagreements amongst the stakeholders who have been meeting so the bill did not pass last year, but there have been, I didn't ask him the number of the bill. I could certainly find out, but the point is it didn't go anywhere. So the associations have been meeting. They are very close to having an agreement amongst all the stakeholders over what would go in the bill. They believe that they have a legislative sponsor, and Stephen is asking to continue the status quo until there's a legislative direction that we know about next April. I expressed to him that the board has to pass a budget by December and doesn't have the discretion to wait. And he is not in favor of an MOU at this time. So I'll be trying to convene a meeting with Stephen, Jeff, myself, and the attorneys, because Stephen's belief is that the legal opinion that he and Sean Myers got 5 or 6 years ago is not aligned with the opinion that Jeff now has. So we gotta figure this out. So more to come. More to come.
I'm sorry,
Can
my,
the treasurer and assessor arm wrestle for it? Or the lawyers?
You mean in public?
You know, so these legal gray areas,
Right?
because I guarantee the lawyers probably won't come to agreement.
I don't know. They're within our own prosecutor's office.
Is somebody
So-
now representing would the assessor have a
So-
different?
Yes, the
Attorney.
assessor has a different attorney. It was Elizabeth who did the opinion years ago, and it's
Okay.
Jeff or Rick Peters that has come out with the new one that Jeff has.
Oh, but I'm saying
so-
add between the assessor and the treasurer.
To do what?
Okay, so the opinion that the assessor was referring to, a prior opinion, is just now superseded by Peter's opinion because he represents assessor and treasurer? He gives
No,
advice to
no.
both
No, I
department
don't think
offices?
he does. I
So who
think
now
that,
gives Elizabeth?
I believe Elizabeth
Still with-
continues to be Stephen's attorney.
So Steve could talk to Elizabeth and potentially generate a contrary opinion or a concurring opinion.
Yes. Yes, which is why we need all of us, all the attorneys,
Yeah.
all everybody
Just making sure they had
involved.
that he had
Oh,
the
he-
advice that he needed if there's a gray area or a contrary argument.
Is
to be
there a
made.
way to get
Yes.
a copy of that old legal opinion from Elizabeth?
I don't know that I could find it, but we will certainly be dredging it all up,
Well,
I'm
you know,
sure.
he's making a reference, the assessor of a legal opinion.
He will
I'm
have
sure
it.
he has it.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
So
Might not
then-
be written though.
I don't think it's written
Might just
myself.
be
I was
advice
here
that you
when
got.
What I
that
have from Rick Peters is
You have a memo.
emails. a
Yeah,
few
email.
emails.
Yeah, and that might be.
But
the
it's,
same.
but it's,
Yeah.
emails of record, and
Yeah.
it's, but, and
I
would be
don't think it
great.
was a real opinion, just, really
It's
delved
not a
into-
formal written, no, it's not, but this is advice that we've all been getting.
And how much money do we get in there every year?
It's
less
not
than an FTE,
enough
it's
to have this
Half of,
conversation.
it's about half of an FTE.
I thought it was like-
almost, I think.
It does fund, it pretty much funds an FTE for the assessor. And I will say, as I said this morning, the agreement that we have had with the assessor has been quite effective. Stephen's done a very good job managing the, the amount of money, balancing what's taken out of the fund and what comes out of general fund. He's been very mindful of preserving fund balance in that fund. That's part of his concern about a MOU, is all of the fund balance that he's been so careful to maintain would now go to the treasurer. And that he wouldn't have the money for the FTE that he needs. It's a balancing act like the rest of the budget. So there's all of that, and Stephen has done a very nice job of using the position that the board approved in a very effective way to meet his business needs. He really has. So everything's been good, and I expressed that to him, but here we are with a legal opinion now that we need to address, conflicting one.
So,
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, the flip side is treasurer hasn't come to us to make a business case, but assuming that he needs this thing that he needs, it's, as far as we're concerned, like it's kind of between them in a way, like we're gonna pay either for more of the assessor's FTE, or we're gonna pay for the treasurer's software.
Right,
I mean,
or maybe there's capacity for both,
Yeah.
which is part of Stephen's concern about using fund balance for the treasurer's needs. And part of what I said, and I will say to you, at the end of the day, this is an appropriated fund, and the Board of County Commissioners has appropriation authority. And as long as it's within the legal purposes of the use of the fund, your direction is where the buck stops.
well, let me ask this, when the lawyer says treasurer gets to have a say, if we're the one deciding, what does that even mean? Like if Jeff came and said, any year that Jeff had come and said, I think that we shouldn't use it all in the assessor, I need something else, we would have listened to that and decided what to do. So what does it mean, what extra thing does he
So
get?
we
to do?
started from a point of Jeff believing that the board did not have appropriation authority.
Oh, okay.
And after a conversation with Rick, Jeff, and myself, Rick acknowledged that the board does have appropriation authority, but in his opinion, the way the law is written, it says the treasurer shall hold the fund. That gives the treasurer a say in how the fund is used.
Say meaning what?
Well, originally Rick was saying that the treasurer was the only one who got to say how the money was used. And I showed him how, in accordance with state laws, that is the purview of the Board of County Commissioners. So what Rick has suggested is that, that Jeff be able to weigh in on the decisions that the board is making. And what I suggested is that, given the history of how this fund has been used, that we make it a three-way agreement, the board, the treasurer, and the assessor, because I was trying to ensure that the assessor's needs continued to be considered. But that, and Jeff was fine with that, and Rick believes that that would meet the intent of the law, and Stephen is not agreeable to that solution.
I guess what I'm getting at is, no MOU, assessor doesn't agree.
Yeah.
aren't we gonna do the same thing? Like Jeff's gonna come in and say what he needs and he'd like it to come from there. And Steve will say what he's been doing and he wants to keep coming from there and we'll make the decision like we do on every budget decision. What,
That
So
is
do we
what it
need the-
will ultimately come down to.
do we need this MOU to wring our
Uh,
hands about it?
In my opinion, not really,
Okay.
but there has been introduced a gray area with this assertion that the treasurer gets a say in how the money is used, that I think we need to address.
Does it address that in the intent of the legislation?
I couldn't find an intent clause for that particular legislation. What you see in the law, and this was the conversation that I had with Rick. The treasurer holds all the money of the county and many other jurisdictions. And he doesn't get a say in how those funds are
Right,
used.
So that's the only language they're
So,
gonna do.
and if you read the RCW that is at issue, there is one section of the chapter that says, that the state, so the REIT money is collected, it's sent up to the state sends back a portion that goes into this fund. And then the rest of the money that's the state keeps is deposited into a fund that the state uses for state purposes, right? And the law clearly says that the state portion of the money goes into a fund that is exempt from, I wanna say RCW 4388. I used to know that one by heart because that's the state budget law. And it's clear that the state fund is exempt from appropriation. If you read farther down in the chapter, it says that the county, the money that comes to the county is to be put in a restricted fund held by the treasurer. There is nothing about it being exempt from 3640, which is the county's budgeting law. It does indicate that it's a restricted funds. It specifies how the county can use the funds. And when you read the RCW 3640, it clearly says the Board of County Commissioners shall appropriate all funds, all monies belonging to the county. And the BARS manual says that all government funds require appropriation. So when you take that into account and the fact that the law that discusses this fund in particular does not clearly exempt, and I showed Rick examples, there are two funds in the county that are exempt from appropriation. One is in the prosecutor's office, it's the anti-profit trust fund. That is solely under the purview of the prosecutor. And then there is a second fund, it's the treasurer's investment fund that clearly says it is exempt from appropriation. And I gave those to Rick as examples and showed him that those don't apply to the fund in question. He said, okay, it's subject to appropriation, but it says right here, treasurer holds the account. So he continues to assert
But
that the
there's,
treasurer has purview.
but there's a difference between holding the account and having,
I agree with you. I have an attorney that says no. So I was looking for a easy path forward, especially now that there's appropriation or legislation potentially on the horizon. And that legislation, what Stephen has described to me, the legislation clearly states that of the revenues, 35% will go to the treasurer and 65% will go to the assessor.
On the new
So that
legislation?
that will make your job super easy. But until we have that, we have this thing that is now.
You
in
have
question.
two conflicting opinions.
Yes, I do.
I mean, they're not written opinions, just kind of opinions. They're
Yes,
not
they are.
researched opinions. So I think we just tell the prosecutor, okay, we'll go to the AG, otherwise we're doing it the same way we did last year.
Just
Why don't we
have
just go with-
Elizabeth and Rick
And
Work
Rick
it
to
out.
hash
wrestle
it
over
out.
it.
Or let's just go with the assessor's that's the compromise that the trade groups are working out. Let's just get ahead of the legislation and give
I
65%
asked
to the
Stephen if
assessor
he
and
would
35% to the treasurer.
agree to that, and he absolutely will not. He thinks that impairs his ability to do what he's been doing.
It's only if there's more money then that's acceptable.
Yes, and according to Stephen, he needs, and again, so I apologized earlier to the assessor because I hadn't had that conversation with him yet. So now I'm apologizing to the treasurer if he or his staff are watching. I need to have a conversation with you, but I'm informing the board where this is all at. Stephen says that he needs access to the existing fund balance that he has carefully maintained to be able to continue with the FTE. He is extremely concerned by the conversations that we have been having about budget cuts, and he believes his need is even greater to be able to charge this FTE to RETAC.
Did you have
So-
any good solutions for balancing the general fund?
He has suggested that you look at vacancies, long-held vacancies in each office and department, and target those vacancies that have been held for a length of time more than, you know, the time it takes to just fill them, before you consider broad cuts. And I told him that we're doing just that. So.
I would say just to solve this for today, I'd just say, absent a court order, we're gonna do everything the same as we did last time.
I was looking for a negotiated solution that would satisfy everyone, and I'll continue to work on that and hopefully come back. Otherwise, you're right where you'll need to be.
This particular fund is a source of conversation of every single budget process.
This fund does come to the fore every time.
I know, it's
So,
amazing.
Yes.
you know, just because we have Kitsap County.
I don't remember having this.
It's relatively, aren't we talking like 35,000? I thought it was
That's a little
something.
bit more.
It's enough to fund an FTE. Could you
Yeah,
look that
I
up
didn't
very
know.
quickly, Jennifer?
It isn't.
I didn't think it was enough to fund an FTE.
Things I see in here, what, 30,000,
Yeah.
20 to 30 revenue a year. It looks like the fund balance right now is 290, 285,000.
Very carefully managed by
Because
Steve.
what happens, I remember, this is the thing when he says about, so it's like anytime he's got a little extra, this is what you're saying about how the assessor really does it, you know, is able
Yeah.
to manage. Like what might be reversion or whatever, he shifts that part of the cost
Yes,
from any savings
the
he's
general
got.
fund.
That way the fund balance stays up there and then he can continue to extend the life of this FTE. Because if it were
Right.
just based on the annual revenue, it would never.
So that's what his
Right.
reversion rate is.
So he's using his reversion.
his reversion rate is usually next to nothing. However, I will say that if you look at the reversion chart, he has been reverting a substantial amount. And this year, on the record, I hope you're listening, Stephen, the assessor discovered that the position had been budgeted in the general fund rather than the REIT fund for whatever reason. He caught that error. Recently, he notified me immediately as soon as he saw it. We looked and we thought it was okay, but he insists that it's budgeted incorrectly. We deeply appreciate the assessor coming and saying he has extra money and he has every intention of reverting the entire 100,000 in general fund at the end of this year. So I told him I would share that with you. I told him it's already on the financial plan that we've shared. And you know, I want to acknowledge his intention of reverting money that he didn't believe he should have received. So he's been doing great. Steve's a good manager of the funds. But here we have an issue.
So then the next step for this is you're going to be meeting with Treasurer Gadman, and then you will be having a joint meeting with both Assessor Drew as well as Treasurer Gadman and
And the attorney.
the attorneys, to kind of discuss a middle plan
A middle
until,
ground for the short term
until there's
until legislation is passed.
legislation passes.
But if it comes to, you know, back to the substantive issue. If there's limited funds and we get, I mean, so at the time that and I was before I was on the board, at the time the Board of County Commissioners set up this structure for the assessor's FTE, you said something earlier this morning about there was a thought that the treasurer would never need money out of this, or just didn't at the time? What was the understanding about in the
Sean
future?
Myers, right. Sean Myers said that she was done with the intended use of the money for the treasurer's office and would not need more money.
Ever.
That was the impression.
Okay.
You
I
know,
see
whether or
Sean.
not that was reality, and again, that was a number of years ago, my impression was that Sean was coming. Sean and Stephen made a joint presentation to the board. Sean said, I've used the money for what I needed it for, it should all go to Stephen now. And Stephen said, yes, it should all come to him, and here's how he was gonna use it. And they were all happy, and the board said, okay, as long as you can fund an FTE, we'll authorize it in REIT Tech. And then there was the concern about the fund being decimated because it doesn't pull in as much money as an FTE costs. So a few years later, the board agreed to give Stephen this flexibility that is in the proviso that you described, where he can use his discretion to charge as much to REIT or general fund as he sees fit, and that's the part that Jeff is now objecting to. Because now Jeff says he has a use for the money.
There's nothing in law or writing or previous, you know, anything concrete that binds this board that the treasurer doesn't need this money or gave or abdicated all claim to this fund.
Oh, no, no.
So it's legitimate, in your opinion, for the treasurer to come and say, I've got, you know, I haven't needed it for a while, but now I do. And for then we have to sort through which is the better use of that fund.
That is your normal duty when it comes
There's
to
no
budgets.
prior obligation of a board to tell the assessor, you have this in perpetuity for this purpose, or
Nope.
it's just kind of, here's what we plan to do in the next couple of years.
In fact, when at the time the then commission agreed to the proposal by Sean and Stephen, they said you can have the FTE as long as the fund will support it. I mean, it was a time-limited thing in their opinion at the time, and you've extended that,
Okay, yeah, and the assessor's been
yeah.
able to make it go a lot longer.
yes, through the
through his
flexibility that
flexibility.
you.
So I guess maybe this is just not contemplated really by anybody in the past.
I guess that was gonna be my question. It's like, since the previous treasurer was the one who agreed to this and made that presentation to the board, doesn't that kind of disqualify the hold or whatever the attorneys are discussing?
Absolutely, I would say no. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was just saying, like, you know, just if
Yeah,
a previous treasurer said, you know, like, I'm
I'm done.
not ceding power, but I'm done with this fund and I'm giving authority for the assessor to use it as he sees fit.
I don't need any, give it all to him,
Give it all to him.
which is basically what Sean said.
You know, at that time, as the treasurer, right, and you're at that point giving that authority over, so.
Yeah.
Is,
I mean,
I'm
what's your,
sure if Sean was
I'm-
still here,
I don't really actually understand her point. Are you
Oh.
saying that should bind the next treasurer or should not?
I don't know, I'm like, does it bind the next treasurer when, you know, a previous, I mean, we're binded by our previous board's decisions,
Well,
right, like, we
not
are, and
really, not unless, I mean,
So does a resolution expire? If this board makes a resolution,
only if
Does
you
it
put
expire?
only if you put a expiration date on it.
But if it doesn't have an expiration date, it doesn't rate, after 10 years, it goes away.
So a budget expires, appropriation authority by law expires at the end of every year, and any unspent appropriation reverts to the fund. That's by law, so budgets are, time limited, if you will, just by their very nature. And that's what we're talking about here is a budget. It's a budget, it done in accordance with the law, with a flexibility that you've allowed to one of your elected officials, that another elected official is now challenging, and we're trying to work
Okay.
it out.
Did we do a resolution when we transferred that?
There was no reason to.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
you put it in your budget. There was not a resolution necessary. And there wasn't a MOU proposed at the time because
It was an
everybody
agreement.
was in accordance. Yep. So there's, I'm sorry to have eaten up a half an hour with this, but
Okay. No, that's, I think it's good, just good to know, and, you know, I look forward to how those conversations between the treasurer and Assessor Drew and the attorneys work out and where they kind of land on this.
Do we know what the treasurer's ask is for his software?
does he have
Is it in the
a
budget?
budget request for RETech?
Look into it.
Is it just a standalone treasurer system or an ATS for both assessor and treasurer? It's just dealing,
So it's not technology necessarily. That's where I'm a little bit vague, and I need to get a better understanding from Jeff of what he's proposing to charge to this fund.
Okay. Well
I
then,
was just curious, no biggie, if you don't know that.
because an ATS system itself would be huge, very
Yeah,
It's thinking I got logged out.
okay, so then,
okay.
more information to come on
More to
that,
come.
and, okay.
The adjusted FTE is in there for the treasurer. That's a change request in there.
I'm sorry,
So the adjustment of the FTE allocation for the treasurer is a change request currently.
But no software.
out of
But no
RETech,
yeah, but no software.
for the treasurer wants FTEs from this fund?
He wants to fund 3 FTEs, 5% out of the fund.
5% of 3 FTEs out of this fund.
Yeah.
So he wants to shift it this year as well?
No, this would start in
24.
and it's $12,000.
Yeah. That's the only request and right now.
Yeah. So, more to come.
Alright.
More to come. All right, let's get back to the conversation that we were having, and that means I need to log in so I can share my screen. While I do that, Nicole, why don't you,
Let me share my screen. Talk about these options.
yes,
So we left off talking about balancing general fund options. And so we made a short list for options on how to balance the general fund. And this is just gonna share it on the screen. We just have a bullet list here. So the first option is the percent reduction, and that's where we were talking about just doing a flat reduction. We have the sheet where we started off with 2.5%, moving up to 10%, and what that dollar amount would be. And then the other option could be possibly to reduce contribution to the reserves. It's not necessarily something that's sustainable, it's not permanent.
it's
When-
not good.
Right, but it is an option. When it was visited back in 2020, during the same type of exercise, it was estimated to be about 300,000 a year. That's a reduction of 25%.
It's an option that's not permanent and ongoing, and any shortfall in the reserves that are created by not making a contribution in the next 2 years would have to be made up in the future. So it's not a good option. However, it is one way to bring the internal rates down. And I do believe that offices and departments are going to be asking what's being done about our internal service rates. So this is one way to bring them down. And we did it in I think it was 2014, and it just created a big impact later on down the line. But it's an option to contain spending now.
The third is to either suspend or increase the road levy shift. Do you wanna make that? I mean,
So by suspend, we mean suspend the ongoing reductions that we've been making. As you're very aware, we've been reducing the road levy shift by 250,000 a year. We could suspend the reduction, or we could reverse some of the reductions that we've done in the road levy shift and pull more out of.
There's kind
The
of a
road
third,
fund.
there's a third way, because when I suggested this, I saw when you did the sheet, you suspended it for 2 years, but then it started back up again. So my proposal was to just suspend it indefinitely.
Ah.
Not reducing it, not
Yep.
increasing it, but suspending it, and we'd have to take further action to restart the reduction,
Right, we could definitely do that.
which would back a little more out,
Could
because
you
you'd have
help
this,
your model?
Yeah, I'm working it,
would help us a
pulling it
little
up.
bit. We could play it by ear as the.
Right, and ultimately, it's going to take some combination of a few things to get where you want to be.
Yeah, this and also back then as to what's the tolerance that you want to be at the $12 million.
that's an option too. That's the last one there, reduce the general fund reserve, so it's where's that
really,
target?
and I think you should exercise that balance approach.
That's the first thing we should do to get to an amount.
Right, what is the threshold that you feel comfortable with, and then the result, the alternative strategies may not be the 10%, maybe less than,
Right.
and that is helpful.
So also related to the road fund is to increase the road diversion. And you will recall that the pulling money out of the road fund, if you will, is done in 2 ways. One is the levy shift that can be used for any general fund purpose. But the other is to do this road diversion, where the only thing that we can use the money for is to pay for the costs of sheriff road deputies performing safety patrol. So the latest amount that we have from Heidi year to date,
Through August 31st, I was just doing some math right here. So through August 31st, it was $1.8 million for eligible expenses. If you annualize it, it would be $2.7 million, and the amount diverted is $1.5 million. So that would be an additional $1.2 million that we would.
right, and I wouldn't max it out, but you could easily add another 500 to 750. And
The activities
yeah, the activity's more
should
than,
cover.
cost more than that. So the diversion could increase to cover costs of the sheriff's office.
And that's legally,
Absolutely legal.
without the crab folks objecting.
Crab does
Yeah.
not like it
We're
whatsoever.
arguing from a crowd that.
They don't like it. but-
And then we wouldn't need to do it if we would increase our permit recovery and issuing, I wanna make sure I don't, I wanna sound like a broken record, I guess that's what
You
I'm,
gotta get that in
I
there.
gotta get that in, if we could increase the number of permits.
So
Go for it.
let's see the sheet, right, and go with Commissioner Menser's proposal about
Bringing it up now.
Suspend
suspending
the
it
road
at-
levy shift reduction
and
and then
then-
increasing diversion.
Wait, what?
500?
Suspending
Oh.
the decrease of the road levy shift. That's was my thing.
Yeah,
And then-
I'm not increased road diversion. I'm not there.
Diversion.
Yeah, I'm not
Well, I'd
not
just
there.
like to see what it would do, just to,
It's good exercise, doesn't it?
because I've always been, I mean, I don't like either one, but that one's less objectionable to me because it's actually going to road-related purposes versus just stealing money out to do whatever you want.
So before I bring the model up, we do have one other item on that list that we think is kind of creative. The ship may have sailed, but one of the things that we just wanted to put out there is going to a 32-hour work week. Which county did it?
San Juan.
Yeah, San Juan County
And
just did that
reduce the
with
wage,
no,
reduce
they
wage.
did
They
it
did
with no
reduce the wage.
reduction in wage, but what we could do here is do this instead of compensation adjustments. And forego
Well,
those.
that has to be agreed to by the union.
It would absolutely have to be agreed to by the union, and like I said, the ship may have sailed, given the guidance your negotiators were given yesterday, but we just wanted to toss that out there.
You know, I saw that and I had actually several employees send that to me as well when they saw that and they were asking about it and I even sent it to the county manager.
Oh, I received a few.
Um,
Don't look at me.
And, you know, I know that they were looking for kind of ways to incentivize, right, working for government and just,
Wait, whose employees are asking you?
yeah, employees
Who
sent,
liked the idea?
yeah, sent the article
There's a
over.
national move afoot to do just this.
And so I was very interested that San Juan County did this. I was like, you know, cause I was like, wait, did they? But no, it's just, it's
There-
an incentive added on and I had completely just blanked on it until you. brought
Yep,
it up.
and there are counties in Oregon that we know of that have been doing it for years, and at least 10 years. And there are apparently counties in California that if not just implemented, have been doing it for a while. So it is some
Like
type of a movement,
So, I mean, if you broke time into hours or whatever, like that's like a 20% pay increase for the hours they're working.
kind of,
Is my math right on that?
yeah. Yeah,
But then they can.
Would the county offices, would they be open 4 days a week?
so the way it's being implemented in other places, some places, like I know that, I think it's Clackamas County, Oregon. It's one of the counties in Oregon are just simply closed on Fridays. And their constituents became accustomed to that.
4 days a week.
The.
There's some
I-
exceptions within.
Right, I
the
think
32
that other counties have structured it to where they're still open 5 days a week and then some employees have Mondays off and some employees have Fridays off.
So how many new deputy sheriffs would we need to give?
We
the
would
same
need to
coverage?
address, if we went this way in the 24/7, you would have to add staff because that would mean more shifts. But non
Wait, what if,
24/7, you could manage it.
if this were about the contracts though? The sheriff's already settled their contract.
The sheriff has settled, but
So it could be applying to the contracts that we settle now.
could be. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
That
San
I
Juan
didn't
County
want to
excluded
miss.
all law enforcement, first responders. There were some exclusions.
There were some exclusions, that
Then
is
it would
true.
make it all, I
These did, was not
was
part of
gonna
the.
say, then it would make it all fit, like we can't give to the other unions the pay increases that we gave the sheriffs. And this would make that fit, right? Cause you'd be like, well, yeah, they get the more pay because they don't get a day, they're working 40 hours.
We'll give them a 20% increase and the others a 20% reduction in work. They get the same.
Well, I don't think it's
It
quite
doesn't quite work out like
equivalency
that,
like that,
but
but. Because you're not gonna, you know, I mean, it's not gonna work good for everyone, obviously, like, some people have to have every dollar, other people can make use of that time to either have a better quality of life, do other work that brings in other income, reduce their childcare costs. I mean, every family's got a different structure. And so my nervousness is like, for what percentage of our workers would this be a real problem, an unwelcome, imposition? And that would be a conversation that I'd want to take up with the union. They represent their
Yeah.
membership.
If
They could
they're,
tell
if
us.
they are interested, I mean, that can be, I don't know if Marie is watching this conversation.
She's got a headache right now.
I told Tara that she wanted to watch this afternoon, so I don't know if they are or not.
Well, I mean, okay.
Again, you gave guidance yesterday, so the ship may have sailed, but we didn't want to lose the concept.
I've never really, I mean, I've never really thought much about this. I'm intrigued. I'm willing to think outside the box. I think I can see corollary benefits to the community and families and everything from this. Like, it's not just about making our budget fit, but like, there's always been a perception that, it's hard on families and children when their parents are gone and we work, we don't have a month off in America like they do in Europe and all these things. We have a culture that's been very work-oriented.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's time to shift that paradigm. We're in a changing world. I'm definitely willing to think more about this. If I felt like the employees supported it, for sure. I mean, I'd just be nervous that, a third of your employees would be like, I won't be able to, I mean, I guess they'd be making what they make now, right? So in a sense,
Or we could do both.
You could,
We could do both. I mean, that could also be an option. I mean, we already sent out a proposal and this could just be an additional incentive to work in Thursday. I'll be quiet. I just. Okay.
sure.
They may take that as a open, no.
No.
It's a much more pleasant conversation to have than the one we're about to. All right, so,
but, I mean, just one last point. Let's just say hypothetically, something like that was instituted in lieu of COLAs that are anywhere different than what they've been in the past, so what are we, like, 2.5, no COLA, 2.5%, or something like that. As we went through that exercise yesterday, we still have potential cuts to make.
You went through the exercise.
Like
and the
just getting the,
Executive
And then
just
session.
the executive employees.
Just
Just
when you
one
have
in
executive
executive
session, Commissioner.
Oh, okay.
So we can't.
I will-
can't,
I will-
okay.
I
That's
would
why I shut
recommend
up.
Maybe this is a concept introduced to you to think about this, and maybe we can move on to the
Well,
Can-
I'd say
Can't
we
can't we go into an executive session right now?
not without notice, can you?
to
We didn't
talk
notice,
about
but-
personnel issues.
Yeah.
But don't
I
you
still
have to give
have,
notice?
I still have the RCW.
No, you can call an executive session at
Then
any time.
I'm gonna call an executive session.
Then some people need to leave
I'll
the
be back.
room, and we should get Maria down here if she's available.
Because I think we all want to discuss it and I just,
I'm fine.
I
My
wasn't even
concern,
thinking about that being an executive session.
yeah, so, okay, so then I will be questions relating to the interpretation or application of a labor agreement. It is 2:40 PM, and no commissioners' action follows, but further conversations in the future. Okay, so then let's go to the, chart,
The graph.
the graph.
Share.
That was heavy side, Commissioner.
So here we are. Again, this model has been designed right now. We're a little above the line, and it's part of what I've been trying to look at of why, how we got above, because I had designed the model to stay below the line. In offsetting everything that you added, so, going to add the $3 million that I think that are going to be before you in the must-dos. And then,
That's your must-dos? These right here?
right, I know they added up to a good deal more than that, but I mean, they've already discussed less fund balance for,
Developmental services.
yeah,
Okay.
CPED, and then
That's a good number.
I think that we'd be able to whittle down a few more of them. So I'm thinking we can get to the $1 million mark or possibly less in must-dos. And then I'm thinking if we did budget reductions of 5 million, where would that get us?
Can we do 4.5, just so that-
Can we do a
Yeah,
what?
That's fine, 5 million, sorry. That's
All right,
It says 8 in the next year.
I'm fixing that now.
Sorry, I'm like standing right in front of it. Sorry.
And let's see what it looks like. Oh,
Oh,
it's not enough.
Okay, let's
So
take
have you-
the road levy shift out.
You do the road levy shift piece.
I took out the levy shift. It had been on this line.
That was for 250.
So that added a little revenue back.
Did you,
$250 a year reduction I completely pulled out.
did you do road diversion?
What about the diversion that?
Add the diversion.
I mean, is that,
I'd
is
like
that
to just
reflected in
see
there?
it. I know Commissioner Mejia doesn't
500,000.
like it, but I wanna see that.
So if we increase 500,000 a year.
Oh, 100,000? I thought.
500.
500.
500,
Yeah, 500 or a
It's
million.
it's 1.5 right now.
That's the
yeah,
road.
so we could
1.5
put in
we-
another 500.
2.8, she said.
We could, yeah, she said 2.8 or something like that.
They would have 2.8 worth
I-
of expenditures.
So we've
but
seen
the-
it drop. The reason it's set at 1.5 is there have been years that it was below that. So that's a conservative number. I wouldn't wanna max it out and have the sheriff divert road deputies to doing other things and not make the mark.
Let's just start there, then that would that would bump it to 2 million from
Becky,
1.5.
That would bump it to 2. Yes, and
So
someone,
it's just a question that line was the reduced road diversion.
Oh, but that's just the line. It's
I'm,
just
that
added-
doesn't matter.
it's got a label on it, but that,
Okay.
I'd wiped out the money and I'm just using lines to put in.
Okay, I
that'll,
just,
Affect the
Shrunk
graph.
back.
That's better.
Can you add, not just the 524 and 25, can you add that, the 500 for 5 more years?
So that would mean that, let me just double check that it didn't automatically add that to the
the
property tax in future years. It did. If I were to add another 500,000 a year, that'd mean we were bumping it up to 2.5 and then 3. And so this is added to the
Got
base
it. Oh, it's
at
already
2
in the base,
million
yeah.
a year. Yes.
Can I ask a question? So
Sure.
the maintenance level changes for it, I get those. And there's the policy level changes, and then there's additional policy level changes.
I split up, so this policy level change here you will see exactly matches the amount of policy revenue.
Okay, so
Coming
that's
in.
for.
Ones that
So
have
once they
revenue.
come in with
So
revenue.
those are
Okay.
no-brainers, we would do them. And then I think that there's 3 million, if you look at the list that Nicole gave you, out of that list, only one comes with partial revenue.
So with the 3 million, so it just wouldn't be, it would be ongoing, right? So.
Yes. Are all of them ongoing or any of them one time?
Just the CPED
CPED's ongoing.
is, it, yeah, has the one.
Hey, Rob.
It has the
one
one
Yeah,
time
but
piece of
which
it.
were whittled down and not,
Then that's the only thing.
yeah.
Could-
So, no, they're all
Could
ongoing.
you, the budget reductions of 5.5?
Yeah, cause you're showing us that $5 million isn't gonna give it. This is, the 7.5 down to 5,
Right.
and now we gotta bump it back up. Maybe it goes to 6 and that's 8%.
So would we have to make 5.5 in 2024 and 2025?
So
Okay.
for it to carry into the ongoing base, you have to put it in both years.
Okay.
So it's not that you would cut an additional 5.5 in the second year. It's just that this shows as an ongoing cut. That's
Gotcha.
how it works.
Oh, is that 5 in both, 5.5 in both years?
Yeah, well, it's 5.5 in the first year
Yeah, okay.
that continues into the
Uh-huh.
future.
Got it.
So, and then it's supposed to go into 6, 5, 750.
I'm just gonna set it up so I can only enter it once, since we're playing games.
6.
That's what,
So,
8% is 6.23, so that's kind of what we're
yeah,
looking at, and that's with the road diversion stuff.
this allows you to hit the 2-month reserve target by the end of 25. You're still
one more
hitting
slide.
that, and then you dip below it,
Go
but
back
not,
to the table. Can you go back to the table, please?
yes.
What if the board considers 500,000 road diversion? Road levy shift.
So 500,000 in diversion plus 500,000 in the levy shift,
That's where we were,
it is,
5 years ago.
well, we were higher than that 5 years
Higher
ago.
than that, we've run
Yeah.
down.
Yep, so I'm just.
That'd be $1 million
Just
a
doing
year.
numbers here, right? Sure. See what that looks. In that case, you can go back down to 5 million in reductions.
Or 5.5.
5 million. Just to see how it looks.
Not good.
That's good.
If you can get it down, like 7% is 5.4,
5.4,
so you could go from 10 to 7%,
maybe 5.4.
5.45.
So it would be where?
Now we're right around the
I
7%
know, that's what they
column
were asking.
to get a
I
5,
Put in it.
if we cut 5.45 million.
Yeah, it's there.
It keeps you at your target within the biennium. In the long range, we would be wanting to make adjustments as we go and hope to see recoveries in revenue, especially if we get the permits out the door
Get the
faster.
permits going, then we've got her. Glad to hear you. I'm glad to hear that sinking
With
in.
ya.
This is probably
I
a
don't
good
think
strategy
it'll
for you to
be
consider.
worth that much, but.
So then how much would be the cuts?
So the
7%?
cuts I've got
5.4.
at 5,250, which falls where?
Yeah.
7%, 5.4, 7%.
7%.
Although this does need to be adjusted because, this includes juvenile court with no 24/7 operations with, so we need to make that quick adjustment. But
Well, if we
It's not
get-
gonna, I don't think it'll be
Yeah,
enough.
but it's a small amount,
It's a
right?
smaller amount, cause it's not their whole,
So if we left that out, if we just, right,
Yeah.
but if
If
we
we're
just
able to
put-
get a contract with Grace Carver, that would be additional revenue coming in
That's
to
right.
pay for their services.
It's true.
That's the, road, that's increasing the road diversion and the road levy share.
Yeah.
Which is, historically, it was much higher. We have done, been reducing, now you bring it up again because the circumstances is such. But you're not going back to the levels that you were 6 years ago. Another, Jennifer's twitching right now, but.
I know, I bet.
I don't blame her.
Those are the options in difficult times, is you need to strike a balance.
But let's talk about the road fund for a moment.
why are you looking at
Well,
me now?
because this is a conversation we've been having internally in the budget office. What we see in the road fund is that there is a large appropriation every year that is never spent. They never spend the entire amount. They revert millions of dollars. If they actually showed in the financial plan what they could really spend in any given year, then the fund balance would be way bigger. If we were to fund, and I'm looking at you, Romero, because you're very familiar with the tip model that Stephen Gorchester did. If you were to put the money in to fund the projects that are ready to go and got the money out the door, when scheduled, then we would be making much more effective use of the money that we have, but because they don't, they sit on a lot of money. Every year.
You're absolutely correct, and that is the conversations that we had for years, really is. We continue to see, even a few years ago, the road fund was going in the red, but that red never materializes because of the reversion they go through. So there is an opportunity to look a little more realistic as to what the delivery and the expenditure associated with that delivery of those projects are, that reflects in the 10-year plan. So this is, on point.
Is the explanation they're just not getting projects teed up and bidded and ready to go?
Well,
quick enough?
right now, obviously, there's not enough engineers, there's not enough consultants. And so it may be in traditionally, Public Works, not just here, everywhere, tends to load that to make sure it is anchor the revenues.
I think a good example is that peat bog we're trying to go over at Black Lake. Really, if you think about it, that project got delayed.
Right. Yeah, that's,
It's just a good example
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
what's going on,
Absolutely.
not at that scale, but at other scales. It's been going on like that for many, many years.
No, absolutely.
It's probably not gonna change.
No,
just because
probably
even with
not.
contracted, they're.
Right, there's a multitude of things that drive it.
So whether this will have an impact to the road fund, obviously, whether it have a detrimental impact to the road fund, perhaps not.
So in 2022, they reverted $4 million, which was 12%.
How much, Jennifer?
$4 million.
4 million in appropriation.
And that's about, going back, 20 was 5%.
Pretty typical.
19 was 4.2, or not percent, millions, 4.2, 5.3, 5.4, so it's,
How does that
it's
impact the
consistent.
general
I'm-
fund? How does that impact?
So basically what we're saying is there's sufficient fund balance to
To do the
make the
diversion.
fund.
To increase the diversion.
Oh,
That's the
gotcha.
point of that conversation.
Is it, what's the impact on the ground of doing the road chips and diversion? Theoretically, we were trying to get off of it, but.
But also, I had said even when it was a lot of road diversion, the board made an investment on REIT to really invest on, with that balance. Now you leave the believe the board may consider also bringing additional $2 to balance that.
REIT
if there's
two
capacity.
has the same challenges in revenue as REIT one,
Right, but it's the fund balance different.
Not all debt,
not,
right?
not, given the, projections.
But anyway, so the point is,
About 12 million.
the
in
point is
REIT two.
you have invested in REIT
At the moment,
in REIT $2
You're,
in public works,
yes,
there's the potential
Significantly.
to shift something. of
significantly.
yes.
Flexibility then.
And in fact, you have invested on a very robust overlay program using REIT two. The V4 used to be
Right.
funded by road fund. So what, the reason that I'm saying this is more for
Way,
public works
way
and
to
staff.
offset it, yeah.
For
There's
public
ways
works
to
and staff,
offset.
it's not like, taking the road diversion, the road levy shift, but also
Right.
the board making an effort to balance that out.
Yes, we have.
So, anyways, that.
Thank
that was
you,
the
yes,
point of
absolutely true.
My 2 cents
Right.
is Jennifer.
We are gonna have to look at REIT two though, because the number of projects that are in the CIP attributed to REIT two decimate the fund.
So what notice are we gonna
Trails.
put out? Gonna do an 8% cut, get it over with?
7.
But many public works projects. So one of the things that's in there is the reclaimed water in Grand Mound. And we just saw in that Skookumchuck presentation that they've got, what, 5 million in that project in REIT two? If you
I thought it was
went-
only, I thought it was only I just got an opinion from Scott a little bit earlier, so I will share that with you after the meeting.
Okay, but there was a significant amount for the reclaimed water project in Grand Mound.
Mhm.
In REIT two, that could all come out, maybe not all of it, but a significant amount. If we were to, go with the alternate ideas that were brought forward in that presentation.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry.
Oh, just.
Yeah, and you could pay from them from conservation
But I
futures.
think the REIT two fundamental is a little bit different than REIT one, because the obligations.
It's
to
very
REIT two
different than REIT one.
Is in the future, and the board can probably make the determinants, for instance, the overlay program as opposed to be funded at that level with REIT two can be funded at lower level. There's options for the board. A
Projected
little bit
fund
different than
balance
REIT
at the end of the
one, because REIT one, the obligations are set.
REIT one's all debt
Yeah,
burdened right
just
now.
set.
6.8
REIT two is
6.8,
obligations into the future that you have flexibility.
So at the end of this year, we're projecting a ending fund balance of 6.8 million.
The challenge with the Grand Mound project and the reclaimed water is being able to switch that around is predicated on getting approval from the Department of
Ecology.
Ecology.
True.
So. still have to hedge our
I'm just
bets until
saying,
we
that's,
get a green
that's
light.
one of the things that are on the list.
Mhm.
The board's going to have to, you're gonna have to take a look. Because does it make sense to reduce the culvert program? Does it make sense to reduce the trail program? Or does it make sense to, examine a few of these public works projects and how they're being paid for? So those are the things that we'll be looking at in
Goes back
October.
to my humble comment of being surgical about how you're going to do
Exactly.
things.
Mhm.
You may not reduce, budget reduction across the board, but then you get to a point of making sure you go surgically what elements to
Right.
just balance everything out.
All right. Anything else about reductions before we leave this topic?
Well, I think perhaps we need a direction from the board with the 7% is something that we need to send out.
Right, so the next thing on our agenda is next steps.
Well, the next thing is to go through the calendar schedule, so if we wanna get a direction, as far as things go through the calendar.
Okay, so we'll be sending out information to offices and departments. And what we're just checking before we do this. The intention is to send to all offices and departments to be prepared at the presentation meetings in the first 2 weeks of October to discuss with the board how they would address a 7% reduction.
Is 7% gonna make it?
Yeah, I would say,
That's the model they used to.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
we weren't all agreed on road diversion and road shift.
No.
I would say at least 7.5.
I'm gonna
Okay.
say 8 myself.
7.5 or 8, I think is a better.
Do you wanna overshoot so that you can whittle
Yeah.
down?
Yes, that's
No,
kind of what
But I
I'm,
think Commissioner
Right.
is saying is go with 8%, then gives the flexibility to reduce the road
well, I
diversion.
wanna make
Right.
sure we do enough. if we're
Yeah,
gonna
like
do
it's,
it.
we're gonna, and then at that point, we can make decisions on what we're going to do, but that gives us
So the
flexibility.
exercise is
Okay.
8%.
10%?
I
and
think 8, I think
8%.
Do
I'm
you
with 8.
want that email to come from the board, or are you going to send it?
How about if I draft it, Nicole and I can draft it and we'll ask the chair to send it out.
And this will be just for electeds and department heads, or will it be to all staff?
We would send it out only to elected officials, appointed directors, chief deputies
deputies.
in elected offices, and financial leadership is
So
my
then we'll-
suggestion.
Okay, so then I'll work with you on that. Is that okay with the board, that it comes from the
Yeah.
board chair?
Sure.
Okay,
All in the game together to a degree, you know, so.
Okay,
so I'll prepare the email, and then the other thing that we'll be working on is the long-term vacancies. Trying to create a list of the vacancies that have been vacant for some time and what impact those may have.
Do we have what sometime is?
Yeah, what's the definition?
I would say for at least a year.
Oh, gosh, I don't know, less than that, let's try it, cause
Oh.
I think we better make it like a couple of 3 months or something.
Well, it
Oh,
was
no,
longer.
oh, no,
longer than
it
the
takes
time-
longer to
No, I
find
know
an
the recruiting and
employee.
stuff, but that would give us more.
I would say 9 months. I mean, if you say, in a
Make
typical
it in
market,
all of
you
23,
should be able to fill a
let's say.
position in 6 months, so.
Okay, yeah, all,
9
since
months.
January.
Should if you, but that's part of in today's labor market, finding the right person.
Right, it is, but since January.
Let's
They've gotten
say
along since then.
vacant in
First of the year,
2023.
yeah.
All of 23 to date would be sometime. Thank you for that.
It'd be interesting to see sort of what is the aging of those. If we had sort of an aging report for vacancies based on how many have been on the books since 22.
Yeah, if you can have a
And
column
I
in the
don't,
table with the length of,
We will have to work out how we present this information. Eden doesn't do vacancy information very well. Tara will have to pull up every vacant position and see what the date it was last filled, so it's not just a push the button and to get the information.
it's very labor intensive to
So
get
she's
this
probably
data.
gonna hate me when she sees this.
Or she's watching now, she will.
She,
already-
then
I'm
she
sure
hates me
they're
currently.
watching.
Yeah.
Right. I also know that quite a few staff across the county have been watching these conversations because we've already started to hear from folks. So we'll get this email ready to get out right away.
this is not a surprise.
It's,
Been saying it, and,
Materializing.
okay, anything else you need to cover?
Yeah,
It's just go
So-
briefly.
I want, just one other quick thing, as we think about this, I think if we're gonna ask, the general fund folks to make these sacrifices, if you will, I think the commissioner's office should do at least or more.
We're included in the.
you are
budget.
on the
I know,
list.
we're in, I know, but I'm, set the
It's on
example,
the list.
I'm just saying,
It's on the list.
set the example.
You're
The
not
exercise will,
about to
exercise will
exempt
apply to the
yourself.
commissioner's office as
Oh,
well.
for sure, but.
Yeah.
But set the example, we're the leaders, we ought to set the example.
Right.
And so is every elected, they're the leaders too,
I
so,
know.
I
But
mean,
we're the ones in charge of the budget.
so,
Right.
That's part of the formula.
that's part of
When
the,
it comes to your own budget, yeah, we'll have a conversation about which positions we may be considering.
okay.
So the next step is to go through the calendar and what's gonna be coming up. So I'll just share that calendar with you. So as Robin mentioned, it's gonna be presentations starting in October, so the week of October 2nd. For 2 weeks, this schedule was sent out to offices and departments and financial staff to allow them to have time to prepare for the presentations. Within these presentations, there's also gonna be presentations on some of the funds. We'll actually have a discussion also related to different programs that are going on in the county that you guys will need to be briefed on. After the presentations, throughout the first 2 weeks in October, so I'm just scrolling through this document here, but if you need me to stop on a certain day. We're giving a 45-minute break for each department to discuss their current request within the budget. There's opportunity in here, again, to talk about different funds and program areas of interest related to the budget. After we get through the presentations, this is the schedule to come as a high level. We still are working on 2023. So within the budget discussions for the biennium, there'll also be discussions about closing out 2023. So that's Amendment 4. The departments have already had access to our budget system to start putting in requests, and so they're working on that right now. And so on October 19th, we're gonna have budget deliberations for Amendment 4. And what we did this year was to try and include mix between Amendment 4 and the biennium decisions together. During the midterm, we noticed that there was a little disjoining of adopting or coming to final decisions for the midterm before the year was closed out prior. So here we've added the Amendment 4 deliberations along with the deliberations for the biennium, so you can make decisions on how 23 will close before you decide on decisions on what's gonna happen in the biennium. And so this is the schedule throughout October for that. You'll have one opportunity in the beginning of October, I guess mid-October, to do deliberations, and then final deliberations for Amendment 4 at the end of October, with at least 4 different opportunities to go through the biennium, and then final decisions October 27th. The budget office will produce the book, publish the preliminary 2 budget on November 20th. And then we will open up for public hearings in December, the 4th and 5th. And this is that schedule laid out here. And then final deliberations on the budget December 6th and 7th, the certification of property tax, having CIP, and then adopting the budget on December 15th.
Scroll back up to October.
Sure.
In those first 2 weeks of October, you see some days where we just say hold for budget. We're holding those dates because quite often there's conflict comes up and we have to move something to accommodate other things that you have to do. And we hold them because there are issues that come up that you want more information on. So we scheduled some of that hold time for follow-up discussion for you. So please don't look at the times that are on hold and think that they're just simply available. So there's that. And then we are absolutely need to make decisions about this budget by the end of October so that staff have enough time to publish the book that has to come out no later than November 20. So we are jammed with the very tight timeline, and we really can't go past the end of October and meet our legal deadlines. However, I will mention that this deadline to make the decisions comes before the general election. So depending on what happens in the general election, we may need to come back and revisit some of the decisions that you make. We
Is that
consider,
legal? That's all legal?
as long as we get a budget book out by November 20, if we have to make changes, budget staff will
And,
be
and I
working
think what
around the
Robin
clock.
is stating is the results of the,
Yeah,
public
sure.
safety tax, which may
Yeah.
have an influence. Just to clarify what the results of the election you mean.
Right. It's all about whether or not that tax passes. We had talked about preparing two budgets, one current state, one future state, if the tax should pass, but that would be even more extra work. So, we're going to, in this budget, propose that we assume the tax passes, and if it doesn't, we will have identified discrete things to strip out. That will be our proposal to you. But if we don't go down that path, then we'll have to have meetings, after November 7th. That'll be hard.
Okay.
All right.
So if that materializes, your WASA conference may be sacrificed.
I suppose.
Right?
So
Thank you
it is
so much.
3:11 PM. Thank you so much. It's been a long week, and we'll be back October
Second.
October 2nd, bright and
uh,
early on.
to begin deliberations. I want to thank all of you for all of your hard work and getting all of this information together for us.
Good job.
And part two, we will start October 2nd.
Huge thanks to the budget team here in the commissioner's office and to the finance folks all across the county. Everybody's done hard work to get this in order.
Okay. 3:12, we are adjourned.